OnEducation is sponsored by Participate, a community learning platform where the world learns together. Later in the episode, we'll hear about one of Participate's communities, Teach the Global Goals, and how you can get involved in its free community learning opportunities with educators around the world.
Full circle, Glenn,
baby.
We just came full circle on the whole part of the podcast. It's because we're professionals. Welcome to On Education, part of the On Podcast Media Network. My name is Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will discuss how summer school has become a big business this year, whether teaching to the test is a silly phrase, and our guest this week is educator and researcher Sherry Jones.
So this is Teacher Appreciation Week, which means that you get to see lots of memes on Twitter. And I appreciate all of my teacher friends and all of the teachers everywhere. I just like that I've seen already like a million graphics, and it's only, Monday.
I know. People are on it this week. I mean, this year, maybe. Yes.
Yeah. I think that this is the year that teachers really, we should really appreciate, the hellscape of teaching that has been 2020, 2021.
Yes, it's been a challenging year to be.
I like how I said hellscape and you said challenging year. That's so much nicer than what I said.
Oh my God.
Oh
yes.
Boy.
Yes. So all of our teacher friends, educators all around the world, actually, happy Teacher Appreciation Week. What you're doing is, and have always been doing, is amazing, and the way that you're able to pull it off. Through all of the different circumstances that have been thrown in front of you, and still
Heroic.
Be innovative and still be, as Mike says, engaging. You still are all of those things, and so you are amazing people, and a week is the least we can do is Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Hopefully I get the donuts every single morning, and any other kinds of sweet things coming my way. That is a great thing for Glenn. If you just give me sweet things, boom, that'll satisfy me.
Some Sour Patch Kids and you're all set.
Yes, I haven't had some of those in a long time, so yes, that would be fantastic.
They're a staple around here now. Jacob calls them sour humans. Little sour humans. He says little sour humans is what they're called. Which is
I love that. Yes, they are little sour humans.
Among all the other things that he's doing lately, that is super hilarious.
Yes,
we're in a planting phase, a gardening.
Oh,
phase.
Nice.
He wants to plant seeds.
Awesome.
He took a tomato off the counter, and then he went out into the backyard and he put the tomato in the ground.
Okay.
So, that's kind of...
You're going to have to put
the kind of gardening I'm dealing with right now.
Yes, a tomato plant overnight. You're going to have to put one into the ground there just to,
to pretend.
Like, hey.
Oh my God, look what you did. You grew a tomato plant from the... No, because then he'll take all of the other tomatoes and put
That's true. All the tomatoes could be gone from the house. Yes, that might not be a good thing. Yes. Maybe boy. Glenn's theory of how to go about doing this is not the right way to do this. Super cute, though. I love that.
So let's talk about Twitter, because it looks like the next three things that we're going to talk about all come from Twitter, because that's the way we do things around here.
Absolutely.
So you go first, I guess.
Okay. So friend of the podcast, and it has a guest of the podcast too, Tom
indeed.
Rademacher. He posted today, add Teacher Appreciation Week to the list of things that are impossible for admin to get right this year. That's an interesting post there, and I have something to say about just that part. But here's the real juice, the real hot take. Here's what I want. Call it an early year, and then another little point, nothing else. So let me address the first part, and then we could talk about the other part too. Teacher Appreciation Week to the list that are impossible for admin to get right this year. I think it's difficult for admin to get that right any year. But I think admin does a fantastic job where I work at as far as trying to make sure that we feel appreciated even when it's not Teacher Appreciation Week. And that is fantastic, admin. And I think that if you have that type of situation, then you already know that that's actually not true. And of course, the opposite exists, because I've worked for some administrators that unfortunately never got that right, never showed their appreciation, and in fact, maybe even set up barriers and obstacles for teachers and made their jobs that much more difficult. I think that's like life, though. Don't you, Mike? This doesn't exist in teaching. Anybody that works, now you've worked obviously in public or in education in general, and then you're also working for private companies. Your boss and your bosses, let's call them the people that are in administration, are people too, and they have a variety of way of being able to run either the school or the companies themselves, and some of them are amazing people. And some of them not so much.
And some of them, though, consider themselves still teachers. Like,
yes.
You know what I mean? Just because they're a principal doesn't mean they're a teacher or an administrator.
Absolutely.
And we know tons of amazing principals.
Yes.
We know tons of amazing superintendents. We know tons of amazing administrators at all levels of the spectrum.
Yes.
And if you don't think they're tearing their hair, eyes, whatever out, over the way that the last year has progressed, you're out of your friggin' minds. I have no doubt they are constantly losing sleep over what's been going on and how to make this year as good as humanly possible under the most insane amount of stress in recent history. There's never been a school year like this.
Yeah. And so many decisions, Mike, where you have to make a decision and it's truly almost always a no-win situation.
Incredibly
no matter what,
consequential.
Exactly. Everything that you do has huge implications, like you just said. Like it on a variety of different things. So talk about pressure to perform. But even then, they still have a way. My principal, and we told him that just the other day. I think it was it his birthday? Or no, it was principal's. It was Principal's Day. I think it fell on a Saturday, actually. National Principal's Day. And it fell on a Saturday, so we celebrated on Friday. And we, as a staff, we had this little party for him or whatever it might be, kind of a little thing before school began. And even then, when we're telling him, my God, you were fantastic to work for. And even then, you know what he told all of us? It's because of you guys. That's a great leader. And it doesn't matter if it was a principal at a school or a superintendent or the boss at a specific company. Some people are just amazing and awesome, and they do appreciate you, and some not so much. So anyway, that's my first part. But the part that I really had a problem with, I had a problem with that first part, but this second part is tough for me to go ahead and take. And it says, here's what I want. Call it an early year. So right now we're May 3rd is when we're recording this podcast. This tweet was on May 2nd, Sunday. There's a lot wrong with that. Later in the there's 1,000 likes on it and 86 retweets. So it's got a lot of exposure and 19 responses to it. Later on, as people responded to it, he did write that this is a joke, right? Even if it was a joke, the implication of saying, hey, let's just call it the year right now, the reason why it's bad, multiple reasons why it's bad, but there's this perception, and it unfortunately perpetuates throughout at least the United States. I don't know if it happens in Canada, but in the United States, it is definitely a thing that teachers are lazy. that
Yep.
teachers want to find an easy way out, that teachers have the summer off so that, they still get paid. And there's this perception that whether it's true or not, and it's not true, and we know it's not true, but it is there and it does exist. When you make a statement like this, it just feeds into that. The second part about this is you signed a contract, as many people have, to work a specific amount of time, blah, 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 whatever it might be, in unusual, tough circumstances. But everybody's in unusual, tough circumstances right now that are adults. We talked about this way a long time ago, last year. You had said, Mike, the people that were at the grocery store. Remember that when you were talking about that in April of last year? The people that were at the convenience stores still working every single day, even though there was the potential for them to get sick. They still came to work every single damn day. They still did things because that's what you committed to. The nurses, the doctors, you committed to this thing. Mm-hmm. You can't call it an early year, May 3rd, and then you still have a month left of school. Even if it's a joke, I don't know. It just fired me up because I'm just like, it feeds that perception that teachers are lazy. And number two, you committed to this. So I understand things are difficult and things have been difficult, but you find a way to muster through and you finish out your year, or you resign and you stop being an educator, stop being a teacher if it's too tough. And a lot of people have, but you still gotta be able to go ahead and do that thing. Everybody has in the world. This is not even a localized thing. This is the whole world that's going through this in different phases and different upticks, different people passing away. But we still do our thing because we've committed to it. So anyway, it really got to me as I saw it, and I have a lot of respect for Tom, but this tweet really is just not there.
Not the best joke in the world, Tom.
No.
That's all.
Not a good joke.
So how about Minnesota? I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the state before, but your home state is very purple in this map. We're gonna link an article.
Yes.
And this is about willingness to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
And the article talks about how herd immunity might actually be impossible in the United States because of vaccine hesitancy. And I'll tell you, there isn't much vaccine hesitancy in the great state of Minnesota, is there?
No. And I didn't even know this specifically. Someone else had posted just the image just of Minnesota like cut out. And I was like, where did you get this from? And then they linked the New York Times article. And if you look at the entire nation, it really shows you how diverse this country is. There's so much that you could say about this image, and you guys will have to look at it in the article. It's about halfway through the article. There's an actual image there, and it just basically says uneven willingness to get vaccinated. And it's color coded. So dark purple means, a high percentage of people. And then the lighter color that it gets is a low percentage of people. And my God, it's just insane. And it really speaks though to how different people view what's actually happening right now and throughout the world, how different people throughout the United States view it, and whether or not they'd be willing to go ahead and get vaccinated even. And we have states that are our neighboring state, for example, North Dakota, where it's a very super light color. And then we have Minnesota, where it's the darkest of the colors that are represented as far as on the map there. And it really does speak true, though, to how crazy our ideas and our everything about us, really the core fabric of who we are, and yet we are the same country. So I found it fascinating, and I think you guys will too if you just take a look at it and then just kind of take a look at some of the different states, and it's crazy. It's crazy, and I'm super happy. obviously, that I ended up in this state, and it was just by pure circumstance. It really was an internet search, Mike, that got me to Minnesota. It was the power of the internet, because I was in Colorado teaching there, and my salary was super low and the cost of living was really high.
You were just looking to get paid more.
And my wife and I said, we're never going to be able to buy a house here. We're just not going to be able to afford to do anything more than just live in an apartment. So then we just started looking on the internet for like what state has the highest pay versus the cost of living, as far as those two factors. And at that point in time, which was now 13 years ago, the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin fit the thing. Lowest cost of living, highest pay for educators. Hey, I picked the right state. And I was super lucky to have gotten hired here too. Yes, I'm very excited to live here and to work here.
So another fun Twitter thread. I don't know how to say that person's name, so I'm not going to. But we will link... Cyanergetic, as that at Cyanergetic, something like that. E plus Han equals MC squared, whatever that means. Yeah, so yes. We just butchered your name. I'm sorry. But we're going to link this in the chat. So it says, unpopular opinion for teachers, teaching to the test is a silly phrase. The test covers the minimum standards. The standards are the minimum of what to teach. If you teach the content well and at above standards, then the teaching to the test part resolves itself. He goes on to say, if the test is designed from the curriculum standards for that subject and you teach that subject based on the standards, you're teaching the standards in the curriculum. It's a minimum, not a maximum. CIA, curriculum instruction assessment. Good assessments can guide good instruction as long as it is linked to good curriculum. Are assessments the issue, or is it the power that they've been given that's problematic? Assessments are part of life. It's not that deep. First couple of years teaching, dramatics added. Oh my God, the test. We have to ace it or nothing matters. After the test, oh yeah, it exists, but we're going to learn and have fun in here. You'll do fine. We're not going to think about it until then. There is the dramatic reading of a 4-part tweet. You're welcome.
That was very good.
There's a lot to unpack here. Just like everything you ever hear me say related to stuff that's sort of like at first, like when if you just whizzed by this and you were doom scrolling, at night or something like that, just swiping by stuff, and you just read this, you'd go, yes. Or no, you would go, no. You would go, no. You would go, this is ridiculous. I disagree with all of this. Teaching to the test, is what we do, and it's bad. Like everything, there is nuance to this conversation. And in and of itself, a lot of what he's saying here, under the microscope, I think, of critical thinking, or at least having reasonable arguments, a lot of what he said here has shreds of truth to it. And so it makes it complicated, because I think that, like with a lot of things, the Twitterati, go nuts, and it's it's wrong, but it's not wrong. Some of it is not wrong. The term, it's about how it's misused. It's not about the term itself. By definition, he's right. So, anyways, it's an interesting thread.
Yes.
And I think it actually comes back to a lot of the same stuff that we talked about with learning loss. The idea of, it's not the teaching to the test that's the problem, it's the implications of the testing itself, and that teaching to the test is not proper learning in and of itself, and that there's not learning happening, there's memorization happening. And the the outcomes of those tests become the benchmarks for your entire institution, and in some cases you as an educator.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That's the actual problem with testing and teaching to the test.
Yeah. I also wrote, and he did respond that he agreed with me that the tests are designed by for-profit corporations, as we've talked about on here in the past. But if there is a minimum standard for kids that they need to achieve, I agree with that. But those minimum standards should be created by teachers, even locally created by teachers. So instead of a summative assessment, one-time high-stakes exam, more of a cumulative knowledge base that where you get to prove over an entire year of kind of where you're actually at in a variety of different ways. So it's not just this one test where you basically, it's still a multiple choice test for the most part. The ones that are given here in Minnesota are a reading exam, a science exam, and a math exam, and all of them are multiple choice. It gives you a very limited scope of like what actually the students can and can't do. That limit actually, in that viewpoint, it has political implications. It does as far as within our state and actually probably throughout the United States. And it has also, like you just said, it could have some devastating consequences as far as funding is concerned. It could be associated with funding depending upon if your school did poorly or so on and so forth. So you're right. It is complicated. Many of these things are. Anytime anyone begins, though, with unpopular opinion, though, everybody's going to...
Like I said, doom scrolling.
We're all going to that right now. We're attracted by that, like... hornets. we're ready to go ahead and pounce on those kind of things. So yes.
And what's funny? It's because of the next article. We're gonna link it in the. It's funny. Everyone is just really tired. Like I'm tired, and I'm not even teaching in a class.
Yeah.
There's not much more most of us can take. So when summer school is proposed, speaking of doom scrolling, I can't imagine the dread that some educators who are making, $25,000, $35,000 a year in Florida or wherever, and have to keep teaching during the summer just to keep putting food on the table, or have to use it to supplement their income.
Yes.
It's not good, man. People are tired, right?
Yeah. And it's a news article from Ed Week. It just basically says, summer school is more important than ever. Okay. But teachers are fried and need a break. The biggest thing that I pulled from this was basically that the federal government has given more than $1.2 billion specifically earmarked for summer learning and what they're calling enrichment programs, evidence-based summer learning programs. And we've talked about it too, that companies know this exists out there. So it's not just summer school teachers that they need, but there's programs that people are purchasing. There's apps and so on and so forth where this money could be used as far as purchases. And so I know a lot of teachers that end up teaching summer school no matter what. And I think that what this article was explaining too is that there's going to be a lot more this year. There's a lot more money being pushed to it. And there's going to be a lot more people basically kind of working almost this entire, throughout this entire summer. And man, that's tough. That's a tough situation. And some people, they see that and they're like, it's something I have to do. Like you just described, Mike. Yeah. It'll help me to be able to get one more mortgage payment, a couple more car payments, or just to make sure that we can make it to next fall again, to be able to do, financially. So, God, talking about teachers are fried. That is the case. I don't know if summer school is more important than ever. I disagree with that, but obviously there's a big push by the federal government, and by push I mean a lot of funds that are available specifically for this for the summer. We'll see how it ends up going. As far as what ends up being the outcome of that. And
I'll
for
tell
those
you,
teachers,
if these funds get,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I could get behind. If these funds get used
Yeah.
to fund summer camps
yeah,
for kids to go to summer camp and learn coding or game design or
for sure.
drone flying or all of these really cool things that you learn at summer camps these days, and they pay college kids to teach them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for that. I
Yeah.
think that's great. And I'm not even we can't get enough of those. Like seriously, like anytime we can put money into giving college kids an opportunity to give back, to earn an income, but to also teach other younger kids, make an impression on them.
Sure.
Give them leadership opportunities and opportunities to be a mentor while teaching young kids things that they're super interested in, like coding or game design. All day. Do that all day, please.
But I'm afraid that this might not be that, though.
Yeah, but please don't make, that 45, 50-year-old teacher who has just been like smashing her head against the desk trying to teach 5 kids on a screen and 15, 20 kids in her room at the same time, while trying to keep them all in little 3-foot spaces so they don't touch each other. And telling, Johnny to keep his mask on. Don't make that teacher now have to go teach summer school. She's tired. Teach your contract, because that's what we said earlier.
Yes. Yes.
Honor your deal, and
For
then
sure.
please take a break.
You need a break.
Because you've earned it.
Absolutely.
Everyone has earned it. You deserve it. Because this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and we appreciate you. Look at full circle.
Full circle,
Glenn.
baby.
We just came full circle on the whole part of the podcast. It's because we're professionals. And now I'm going to professionally say that coming up next is Sherry Jones, and you should stay with us.
It is like a spider web. These diverse, interconnected spaces help and inspire us to understand, empathize, and take local action in our schools.
That's Yajaira Guedes, a facilitator within the Teach the Global Goals community on Participate. The community is home to hundreds of resources, courses, and educators around the world, collaborating on how to bring the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals into the classroom.
With our students, and as a collective to be a powerful force to achieve the vision of a more peaceful, healthy, and equitable world.
We'll hear more later in the episode from another community facilitator on why you should get involved.
Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Our guest is a philosophy and game studies subject matter expert and instructor at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, where she develops courses on the philosophy and psychology of game design and on the use of digital games in education. She is our type of person. She's a researcher in open education and of the potential of using blockchain technology to secure open educational resources, and to advocate for the design, research, and use of games for learning in higher education and in the gaming industry. Jones serves as the steering committee board member of the International Game Developers Association's Learning Games and Education Special Interest Group. Welcome to the podcast, Sherry Jones.
Thank you for having me on.
I wanted to actually mention that and we joked about it off air, but I wanted to get it on air anyways. We heard about you from Noah, our friend Noah Geisel, and everyone who listens to the podcast knows who Noah is. He's on the podcast way too much. And
He's like a permanent guest.
And he said, you have got to talk to Sherry Jones. She's going to blow your mind. So no pressure, but any friend of Noah's is a friend of ours, and he knows our people, and we're excited to have you on.
Well, that's great. That I think Noah is fairly brilliant too, so I'm glad he helped us forge this connection today.
Awesome. Sherry, let's first talk about your webcast series called Ethics and Games, and it's a live educational web series created by you and hosted by Kay Novak and Chris Lukes. Hopefully I'm saying that correct.
That's right.
And in the podcast, you introduce an ethical theory or a moral philosophy through the study of a digital game. Can you tell us more about the webcast series?
So first I have to, because I have many titles, I just want to make sure that your listeners know that primarily I'm a philosophy professor who kind of got dropped into game design later, okay? So what I was trying to do when I've been doing this for more than a decade, and I've noticed that my philosophy students have a very hard time grasping ethical theory, philosophical theory, right? Conceptualizing what it is that we're teaching them. So even if I tell them in narrative form of philosophy, they still have a hard time grasping it. So I started to use video games in the classroom. And I particularly picked on free games so that it doesn't cost students anything. But that was for a decade I've been doing this, which is let's play this game and use this game as a thought experiment that help you understand the philosophical theory or ethical theory that we're discussing in class. So later on, the International Society for Technology and Education, ISTE, Games and Simulations Network, had to give them a shout out, asked me to present a series for them. So what I did was I decided to just do a video series where I try to teach one or two philosophical theories using a game that's probably popular to the public. And that's how that series came about. So each theory was focused on one particular philosopher and a couple of theories that people can actually handle using video games.
That's fantastic. So my follow-up question is, one of the goals of the webcast, there's a series of goals, is to help those that are consuming video games. And often, like you just said, those are our students, whether it be at a university like that you're speaking about, or whether it be high school students that I am familiar with, to become better informed about the persuasive power of the medium of video games beyond its entertainment. So we'd love to hear more about that and what we can do as teachers in this regard.
So I think video games were never treated until recent years, because of the good job such as yourself that you're doing to spread the message, right? That until recent years, people see games as frivolous things, as, lowbrow things, as entertainment. So they never thought about the fact that it's a type of medium that spreads a message, depending on who the developer is or who the market is for, right? So when you make a game, it's supposed to speak to a particular audience, and based on the ideology that the audience has, the game often reflects that. So what I was trying to do was to say, hey, you know what? Video game is now the biggest medium that's being consumed all across the world. I mean, it's consumed more than movies, music, and all other type of medium. So I'm thinking to myself, we need to have a serious conversation on what kind of messages games are actually expressing to its players. And we can say, well, there's this magical thinking, which I'm not accusing anyone of doing, but there are a few folks that thinks that if you just put a child in front of a video game, they somehow learn something. But that concept is as if you're putting a child in front of television and just say, watch something and learn something. That's not, that's not how things work. And we as educators really understand this, which is our job is to help students critically think about what it is that they're consuming. We help them think in various angles, right, to understand how to analyze, synthesize, hypothesize, infer, all those kind of tools. That's our job, to help them do that. So when I use video games, there's multiple reasons why I use them, but that was one of the reasons, is I want them to recognize that video games have political and social messages, just like books and films and music and everything else. And sometimes they're more political than other mediums.
Absolutely.
So that was the purpose of that series. Yeah, that was one of the purposes.
when I think of games that you might be interested in, tell me if I'm on the mark here. I'm thinking about games like Papers, Please, for example. Gone Home is probably a really good example. We actually did. You'd actually be into this. We do on the company I work for, Participate. We have a game-based learning community, and we do some live streaming. And a mutual friend of at least Glen and I, Steve Isaacs, and I do do what's called the game study. And in the game study, we did a whole series on Gone Home with Paul Darvasi, which was super cool. That's the kind of game I think. Am I reading that right? That when you're talking about like thinking through deep issues and having like nuanced conversations, Gone Home, Papers, Please, these are games that really fit that mold really well, right?
Yeah, I was a co-presenter with Steve once upon a time. I can't remember which year.
I think we've all been co-presenters with Steve once upon a time.
I know, it's like a small circle, But I'm pretty sure I was the one that introduced game studies to the folks. And nice. Game studies is not... Let me explain the field for just a second, okay? Game study is not just the study of games. It's actually an entire field where people from different disciplines, philosophy, biology, chemistry, architecture, art, design, geology, uses games to teach. But specifically, there's other questions that we ask about games, such as what exactly is the effect of games on us psychologically? What is the root of games to civilization? How was civilization built? So game studies itself is a super complex discipline. And yes, Mike, of course I would endorse that kind of study with your group, because that's the point, is to recognize that games is a kind of interactive literature, but different than literature in the sense that we're passively absorbing it. We are actually doing the procedures that are involved in the narrative to understand the how our actions feed into our understanding, meaning making of the environment that we're in. So of course I would endorse that. Of course I think that that's a really good way to incorporate education to kinetic movements, if you will. And I don't want to go into Merleau-Ponty. Philosopher Merleau-Ponty will tell you that the body is part of meaning making. So to remove the body, to not recognize that the movement of the body actually help us understand the world, is a mistake. That's what games can actually help us go toward that direction.
Interesting. Super interesting. You linked an article, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm telling you, it's on my screen right over here so I can read it later, about Fallout, about the link between Fallout and philosophy. Fallout is like my jam. I'm obsessed with that series, so I'm excited to read it. I want to switch gears a little bit because one of your other passions is OERs. And you've done a lot of work surrounding OERs and blockchain that I find absolutely fascinating. And I know people are starting to hear, for example, the term, the term blockchain has been around for a little bit. I mean, people may not know what Bitcoin is, but they've definitely heard of Bitcoin. But people are starting to hear, for example, the term NFT all over the place. Like NFT is like the first quarter buzzword of 2021 for sure. So before we go down this path of questioning, I thought it might be helpful to define some terms. I think the conversation we're about to have might be the first exposure that some of our listeners have to some of these concepts. So let's talk about blockchain, what it is, what it isn't. You may want to also really briefly explain again what OERs are. We've talked about them on the podcast before, but it wouldn't hurt for a refresher on that as well.
Let's start with OER. That's an easier concept. So OER stands for Open Educational Resources. It's the idea that any material that's published online, that's freely shared with the community across the globe, it could be in the US or across the globe, is considered OER. Now, predating Creative Commons, okay, a lot of us, including myself, were already publishing OER before we recognized what Creative Commons is. And Creative Commons was basically a standard set for copyright to enhance users' understanding of U.S. copyright, okay, but also allow the user to append Creative Commons license onto a project that they made so they can ensure that first they can get attribution. So if you use someone's work, you can attribute them for it, but at the same time, you can use it freely to use it in your classroom and so forth. So there's different levels of licensing, and it's basically what I think the future of education should be, because textbooks, learning materials, a lot of them are behind paywall. And that would distinguish those who can pay for and those who cannot. And what we want to do is to open up education so that there's a global conversation on education. We can improve education for all, make it more equitable, make it more inclusive, so different community can access the material that they couldn't have access before. So OER has this bigger vision of, global education, open education, which is another term. But let me discuss open education really quick. So open education is part of using OER, but at the same time to imagine education outside of the standard LMS. So LMS stands for Learning Management System. Yes. So a lot of us would use an LMS and we incorporate maybe a textbook or something in the LMS. But in recent years, for example, Inoue, a famous author Inoue, have argued for anti-racist ecology. The idea is that the ecology that we currently learn in happens to enforce a traditional, maybe white dominant pedagogy, white dominant hierarchy, white dominant structure. So what he's been saying is that we need to consider of switching the ecology to develop more anti-racist teaching methods. And when I heard that, I thought, anyway, you're really talking about open education, because open education, some of us are using, for example, wikis, Google Sites, whatever, podcasts, such as you guys are doing it, right? Different kind of medium to teach. So it's not tethered to just an LMS. It's not just tethered to a textbook, but we use many different methods to reach different type of students. So open education is a lot more innovative than it sounds. And it's not just free, but it really challenges our ability to teach. Should I go into blockchain now?
Please. Yes, because that's where... and I'm not expecting you to do like blockchain 101, because obviously blockchain's can be fairly complicated, and it's pretty easy to get into the weeds in blockchain, right? That's
right. I'll give a very short pitch about what blockchain is.
Sure.
So everyone know what Bitcoin is, I think, at this point. And also cryptocurrencies, okay? Blockchain is the underlying algorithm for creating products such as Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But that's not the only thing that blockchain can make. Basically, it's a digital ledger, just like the traditional ledger where you record bank statements or bank transactions. They used to be on a physical ledger, right? But blockchain is a virtual ledger where you can record things virtually. And the way you record each transaction is using this thing called a hash value. And this hash value is like 36 numbers and so forth, but 36 or 62. But it's a series of codes with numbers and alphabets, okay? That basically is like a social security number for the object that you're recording. So it's a unique ID for every single thing that's recorded on a blockchain. So just think of it as a digital ledger, and it would make a lot more sense.
Awesome. So we're going to link an article that you wrote, a journal article that you wrote, because a lot of our conversation, a lot of what I'm going to ask you about is kind of based on this journal article, which is talking about OER and blockchain as it relates specifically to academic writing, which is super, it's fascinating. So I feel like the problem statement that we're addressing when we talk about OERs and blockchain and academic writing is that academic writing, scholastic writing, writing for journals is a bit of a racket. And that's to use like the most, blunt terms as possible. But I mean, scholars have to pay to get their journal articles published. There's definitely like a pay to play scheme in a lot of this world that is just absolutely like, I mean, it harkens back to, like, I think about payola, which is like the classic, you know, radio schemes from the 50s and 60s. And so it's a racket, and there are a small amount of companies making giant amounts of money on the backs of academic research. And so, you know, this idea that you're addressing is that blockchain might be the solution to this problem statement. So, you know, what is... can you dive into a little more detail? Like, I've kind of brushed over it, but what is so problematic about our current state of affairs with academic writing and publishing, you know, the way it exists today?
I would love to.
I imagine.
Yeah, it's something I obsess over for a long time. So here's the thing. When, as academics, when we submit our papers to a journal, we don't make money off our articles. You know, we do it because we're trying to spread knowledge. Some of us do it for tenure, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
But when you write these articles, we don't make any money. The publisher make money off our work because, you know, they're managing the material. The problem with that is a lot of our articles, again, are behind paywall. So it's a pay to read system. And some article could be $30. Other article could be $200. So if you don't have money, you can't read it. And in this world right now where misinformation and disinformation basically proliferate the net, I think that scholarly research really, really needs to be open. Okay. So some of us are trying to open our work, but I don't think it's that bad to mention Elsevier. It's pretty famous for what it's doing. So Elsevier is one of the, just to call them out, is one of the bigger academic publishers. They own a lot of publication. And for some of us who want to have our stuff open, so say, hey, we want our stuff open. We don't want it behind paywall. Can we have it open so someone can read it? We actually have to pay Elsevier money for the article to be open. So the cost, depending on what kind of discipline you're in, what kind of article you're writing, it can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $15,000 for one article. So,
holy.
Now imagine a scientist okay, let's talk about the brutal reality. So many people who graduate from the sciences, especially when they're interning or when they're just starting out, they're making maybe $30,000 or maybe $40,000 a year. Yeah. And if you're telling them to pay $15,000, right, for gold, that's called the gold open access article, I don't think most of us can afford it. So a lot of us get hidden behind paywall, right? So only students who have access through school, institutional access, such as like Google Scholar or Academic Search Premier, can read those articles, but everybody else has no access to them. So for us, open access, people who are really promoting open access, we're trying to think about how do we get our stuff published so that we're not paying predatory publishers $3,000 to $15,000, and that number goes up every year. How are we supposed to do that to get our stuff out there? So the question was, okay, I bump into this technology called blockchain. And what is it? It's a digital ledger. Now, let me go back a little bit and tell you one of the stories that I often bring up without mentioning companies or anything. So I said earlier that I've been publishing my materials. I've been teaching with games for more than a decade, and I also have been publishing all my material for free on the internet for more than a decade. Why? Because I feel like I want people to learn from my stuff, because everything is behind paywall. I found out after learning to put Creative Commons license on my material that says, please attribute to me, but use it freely. So it doesn't cost you anything, but at least give me credit for the one generating this material.
Sure, yeah.
I found out from someone who told me that my stuff showed up in a courseware being sold as a package, and my name was stripped from my material. Now, CC licenses were on there, but hey, how do I trace any of that? I don't know that unless someone tell me, right?
Yeah.
My stuff was being used and recycled, and I say, I'm not making a profit. My whole point was to give my stuff free to the educational community. I want students to learn, I want people to learn, and you're actually reselling my stuff and stripping my name off the material. So I started to investigate and go, what exactly is the technology can help solve this problem? I bump into blockchain. What exactly is so special about blockchain? Blockchain records are permanent. It records the creator. It records the publisher. It can record the date of publication. It can record when an exchange hand. It can even record the variation. So if someone made a derivative of my work, it will also record that. That's the bigger version of the bigger vision of what I have for blockchain. So when my article came out, I was invited by the U.S. Department of Education to go to DC to participate in the Education Blockchain Summit. So they held it twice in DC. We were supposed to go back the third time but the pandemic kind of stopped us from doing that. Yeah. But we went back, and many, many entities, without naming specific company, because I'm really not allowed to, many entities were there to propose solutions using blockchain, different type of blockchain, different kind of material to store all educational records. And we're talking about transcripts. We're talking about student ID. We're talking about grades, everything, right? Everything using blockchain technology. So when they saw my article, they were very inspired and said, you need to come and join the conversation. That's how I got to DC. And here I am. Now I'm working for the Colorado Department of Higher Education, and I'm on the OER Council, still continue the fight too. Yeah.
I couldn't help but think, and anyone who has any kind of fascination with like things of internet lore and stories, probably one of the most famous and tragic stories is actually really related to this, and that's that Aaron Swartz and JSTOR story, right? And I would encourage anyone to read up on this, but this person, Aaron Swartz, who was previously already famous and well known, basically, was against what you're talking about, the paywalling of academic knowledge. And so he took a whole bunch of, material from JSTOR and just released it. And they went after him and he was supposed to go to jail and he ended up committing suicide. It's really a horrible story. And it's fairly well known because of how well known Aaron Swartz was prior to this event. But the irony is that in 2013, JSTOR committed to like improving, the work that they did, but they made $86 million in 2015, $86 million on the backs of academics writing papers for them for free, not getting paid. Most academics get paid by going to conferences and presenting and speaking and writing books, even that doesn't make as much money as a lot of people think it makes. So, and obviously being, a teacher, a professor somewhere, which unless you're a tenured professor also isn't making as much money. And that's a whole other podcast that we could get into for sure. So you've written about how blockchain could solve this issue, and how it could be used in OER. You've written that it could protect a scholar's copyright by preserving publication data in the ledger, in blocks, help scholars publish OERs without fear of non-attribution or fear of their material being misused, which is interesting. Record and sustain OER information on the blockchain. So this is kind of like using the metadata of the blockchain information, the ledger note, to record what this piece is, what it is. Enables scholars to form their own OER publishing networks that bypass predatory publishers. Wow. There's a lot. Speaking of JSTOR, I bet you they hate hearing that. So I like how you detailed some of the ways blockchain could help with OER adoption. But coming from someone who does understand this world a little bit, I think the solution in practicality is pretty complicated. And it would require a lot of people to get on board, and that's why you have to have like a summit, and you have to have tons of people there, because it's not just a couple of teachers saying we're not getting paid for our journal articles. There's so many more people that have to be involved, including the JSTORs, and even though they might not like what they're hearing, they have to be at that table in some way, shape, or form, I guess. Right. So do you think academia has the stomach to basically turn the tables on years of writing for profit?
That is such a great question. And here's the thing. Academia, look, when there's money involved, things change. The Colorado Department of Education was already trying to encourage companies to consider this bigger picture, to understand that they want to invite corporations to help with the effort, but there's money to be made, but also at the same time to protect teachers and protect institutions. Now, the next project, which I'm not sure, but afterwards I can give you the link, but Colorado has a site called learningeconomy.io. I believe it's .io. And Learning Economy is Colorado State's effort combined with corporations, businesses, and so forth to consider how to use blockchain technology, how to develop software using blockchain technology to protect all kinds of material, to store all kinds of material. So this work is already happening. Arizona is also doing similar effort, and both states, as well as many big Ivy League universities, which I shall not name, but Ivy League universities, we are all in attendance at the summit. So there's big work that's being done. And like I said, Mike, I agree with you. You're thinking, man, can academia actually handle this? Well, we're pouring money in. There's Colorado already poured in millions of dollars trying to promote OER and trying to educate teachers on what Creative Commons is, right? Mm. The next step is to use this technology to protect everyone's copyright. And therefore, students know who they're citing, and also student gets recorded. So when students create open educational resources, they will also be attributed. And that is the bigger picture. And then the second part about what the learning economy is trying to do is to think about how to create digital passports, or I can say digital ID, if you will, right? That connect their educational records directly to work. So instead of going through, instead of obtaining a transcript, for example, through the university, which take like a day or two to get this process going, and also go through National Clearinghouse, the information will be directly on the student's app. So that's called Self-Sovereign Identity App, SSI. Again, Self-Sovereign Identity App, okay? That's the idea that it's a genuine ID that recognizes who the user is, but the user can decide what information they want to release to a business that's requesting for information about their background. So in the future, there will be a connection between educational records and directly to employers. And also, we're not just going to store transcript, we're going to start storing skills. So every skill that the student learned from a class, for example, might be stored on the SSI application. And SSI also work with blockchain. So don't worry about the technicality.
And digital credentials, though, we're talking about badging too, though. Like we're talking about, like you could earn a digital credential, have it stored in your profile on the blockchain, and then anyone looking you up, like let's say you apply for a job, your digital credentials that you've earned, you went and got some sort of certification from Microsoft for something, right? That could be stored in your profile as an NFT or something, loaded into your or whatever. Like there's wow, it's it blows your mind. It's so cool.
The bigger picture too, and this might be scary, and I'm going to say it, and I'm sorry to say it, but the bigger picture about the students' digital educational journey, if you think about this SSI app, right?
Yeah.
It's that the student can learn from third party beyond the university. I'm not going to name all the companies, but I can get education badges like you're talking about, certification from different sources, and they can create this journey for themselves, specialized based on the job that they're going after. Because each job, they will say, here's what you need, here's a certification, here's whatever skill that you have. And a student can use the information that they have and specialize for a specific job. So in the future, it wouldn't just be higher education, which we still would be a very important part of students' journey, but they can literally record from any source, and that becomes their documentation, becomes their ID. Isn't that
fascinating stuff?
Sounds like an amazing future. If our teachers that are listeners, actually educators of all sorts, want to connect with you online, Sherry, to continue this conversation, how can we do that?
Twitter is a very quick way to do it. So my Twitter ID is Autness, A-U-T, T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, E-S as in Sam, Autness. That's my platform name, by the way. That's like, we call that the planking name. It's like plank across the internet using that username. So if you actually search for that, you'll see all my hundreds of social media accounts. But that's how you connect with me.
Perfect. Sherry Jones, thanks so much for the conversation and coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
This is Ava Gay Blackford, another facilitator within the Teach SDGs community.
I believe that education is the most powerful force to encourage human rights and dignity, to wipe out poverty and strengthen sustainability, to build a better future for all. I think others should join this community because it creates a support network for members and serves as a global gathering place for teachers to share stories and support one another as we all figure out what learning looks like during the current global pandemic.
To access hundreds of resources about the global goals and to connect with almost 1,000 educators around the world, join the free Teach the Global Goals community. Visit go.participate.com/global goals to get started. Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glen Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at OnEducationPod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/OnEducationPod. We're also on Instagram at OnEducationPod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening, stay awesome, and see you soon.